Hello everybody, welcome back to Mason Zero ASMR. My name is Mason, and today, in this video, we're going to be going back to a classic, Commander deck decks. The deck in question today is one of my latest decks, Pir and Toothy. So here we have Pure, Imaginative Rascal, and Toothy, Imaginary Friend. They partner with each other, so you can have both of them as your commanders simultaneously. So, Pure costs 2 and a green for a 1/1. If one or more counters would be put on a permanent your team controls, that many +1 of each of those kinds of counters are put on that permanent instead. So his ability is a little bit like doubling season, at least the counters part of it. Especially in the sense that he doesn't just deal with +1/+1 counters, but loyalty counters and charge counters and other things like that. So he can double planeswalkers, much like doubling season can. And Toothy, Imaginary Friend, costs 3 and a blue for a 1/1. Whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Toothy. When Toothy leaves the battlefield, draw a card for each +1/+1 counter on it. So, they synergize nicely. You draw a card, you put a counter on Toothy, and if you have Pir out, you put 2 counters on instead. So everything is built around drawing cards and putting counters on things in this deck. And, there are just a lot of good green and blue value cards. I am still tuning this deck, so it's still a bit more synergy focused than sort of good deck focused. So if you guys have any suggestions, please let me know. Alright, let's move these guys out of the way, and we'll start with the creatures. Our first creature is Sphinx of Magosi, just 3 and 3 blue for 6/6 with flying. You can pay 2 and a blue to draw a card, then put a +1/+1 counter on the Sphinx. This card embodies both things that I want the deck to do, drawing cards and putting counters, so I think this is fine, and it's a pretty efficient rate. Rishkar, Pima Renegade, 2 and a green for a 2/2. When he enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. Each creature you control with a counter on it has tap, add green to your mana pool. Obviously, the putting counters on 2 things is nice, but since everything will have a counter already, turning them all into Llanowar Elves is going to be very nice. Sakura Tribe Elder, 1 and a green for a 1/1. Sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So, this is just a classic green commander card. No particular synergy other than land ramp. Fathom Mage, 2 a green and a blue for a 1/1 human wizard with Evolve, so whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And whenever a +1/+1 counter is put on Fathom Mage, you may draw a card. So again, a card that does both things that we want. Merfolk Looter, 1 and a blue for a 1/1. Tap, draw a card, then discard a card. This is just a cheap way to reliably draw an extra card every turn to get some more counters on Toothy and things like that, but not the most impressive card otherwise. Zamek Guildmage, green and blue for a 2/2. Pay a green and a blue. This turn, each creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Or pay green and blue and remove a +1/+1 counter from a creature you control. Draw a card. I do love love that Pir and Toothy do embody both facets of the Simic Guild from Ravnica. So all of these Ravnica and Return to Ravnica Simic cards work really well with it and do both counters and card draw. Acidic Slime, 3 and 2 green for a 2/2 with Death Touch. When Acidic Slime enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. Acidic Slime is another great green staple in Commander. Renegade Krasis, 1 and 2 green for a 3/2 with Evolve. Whenever Renegade Krasis evolves, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control, with a +1/+1 counter on it. So he's going to be adding a lot of counters as well. Forgotten Ancient, 3 and a green for a 0/3. Whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto another creature. This just gets counters naturally through the game, but it's also a way to double counters with Pir out, because if we move the counters to another creature, it will double them with Pir on the battlefield. Ridge-Scale Tusker, 3 and 2 green for a 5/5. When Ridge-Scale Tusker enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. Dead Bridge Goliath, 2 and 2 green for a 5/5, with Scavenge for 4 and 2 green, which is you pay that cost and exile this card from your graveyard. Put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to this card's power on target creature. Herald of Secret Streams, 3 and a blue for a 2/3. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them can't be blocked. Needless to say, this is a win condition card in this deck. Crystalline Crawler, 4 generic for a 1/1 artifact creature with Converge. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. Remove a +1/+1 counter from Crystalline Crawler, add 1 mana of any color. Tap, put a +1/+1 counter on Crystalline Crawler. Since we're only in a 2-color deck, this will only come in with 2 counters, but if we have one of our doublers or something, then it will be much better off. Simic Manipulator, 1 and 2 blue for a 0/1 with Evolve. Tap, remove 1 or more +1/+1 counters from Simic Manipulator. Gain control of target creature with power less than or equal to the number of +1/+1 counters removed this way. Vastwood Hydra, X and 2 green for a 0/0. Vastwood Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. When Vastwood Hydra dies, you may distribute a number of +1/+1 counters equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on Vastwood Hydra among any number of creatures you control. Elusive Krasis, 1 a green and a blue for a 0/4 with Evolve. Elusive Krasis is unblockable. Luzon Scholar General, 2 and 2 blue for a 1/3 with Horsemanship, which is this creature can't be blocked except by creatures with Horsemanship, so in most scenarios, unblockable. Whenever Luzon Scholar General deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. Experiment 1. 1 green for a 1/1 with Evolve. Remove 2 +1/+1 counters from Experiment 1. Regenerate Experiment 1. Lifeblood Hydra. X and 3 green for a 0/0 with Trample. Lifeblood Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. When Lifeblood Hydra dies, you gain life and draw cards equal to its power. Lots of Hydras in this deck. Hero's Bane, 3 and 2 green for a 0/0. Hero's Bane enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Pay 2 and 2 green, put X +1/+1 counters on Hero's Bane, where X is its power. Scavenging Ooze, 1 and a green for a 2/2. Pay 1 green, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze, and you gain 1 life. Arcanus the Omnipotent, 3 and 3 blue for a 3/4. Tap to draw 3 cards, or pay 2 and 2 blue, return Arcanus to its owner's hand. Champion of Lamholt, 1 and 2 green for a 1/1. Creatures with power less than Champion of Lamholt's power can't block creatures you control. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lamholt. Avatar of the Resolute, 2 green for a 3/2 with Reach and Trample. Avatar of the Resolute enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each other creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Duskguard Captain, 2 and a green for a 2/3. Outlast for a green. So you pay a green and tap it. Put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has Trample. Undergrowth Champion, 1 and 2 green for a 2/2. If damage will be dealt to Undergrowth Champion while it has a counter on it, prevent that damage and remove a counter from it. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Very hard to kill. Solemn Simulacrum, 4 mana for a 2/2. When it enters, you search for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. And when it dies, you may draw a card. Always a good value card in Commander. Synergizes a little bit in this deck. Llanowar Elves, 1 green for a 1/1. Tap to add green to your mana pool. Primordial Sage, 4 and 2 green for a 4/5. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may draw a card. Armorcraft Judge, 3 and a green for a 3/3. When Armorcraft Judge enters the battlefield, draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. And our last creature is Voral of the Hulkglade, 1 a green and a blue for a 1/4. Pay a green, a blue, and tap. Double the number of each kind of counter on target artifact, creature, or land. Now we'll move on to our instants and sorceries, of which there are not too many. Our first is Commit to Memory. Commit is 3 and a blue for an instant. Put target spell or non-land permanent into its owner's library, second from the top. And Memory is 4 and 2 blue for a sorcery with Aftermath. Each player shuffles his or her hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards. Blue Sun's Zenith, X and 3 blue. Target player draws X cards, shuffle Blue Sun's Zenith into its owner's library. Krosan Grip, 2 and a green. With split second, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Cyclonic Rift, 1 and a blue, return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. Overload for 6 and a blue. If you pay that, change its text by replacing target with each. Beast Within, 2 and a green, destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 beast token. Inspiring Call, 2 and a green, draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. Brainstorm, 1 blue, draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. Rishkar's Expertise, 6 mana, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. You may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand, without paying its mana cost. Deseret's Gambit, 3 and a Phyrexian blue mana. Draw 2 cards, then proliferate. Explore, 1 and a green. You may play an additional land this turn. Draw a card. Cultivate, 2 and a green. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Put one into your hand and the other onto the battlefield tapped. Urban Evolution, 3, a green and a blue. Draw 3 cards. You may play an additional land this turn. Devastation Tide, 3 and 2 blue. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. With Miracle for 1 and a blue. Our last sorcery is The Crowd Goes Wild, X and a green, with Assist. Support X. Each creature with a +1/+1 counter on it gains trample until end of turn. Now we're on to enchantments. First we have Curse of Predation, 2 and a green, enchant player. Whenever a creature attacks enchanted player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Zendikar Resurgent, 5 and 2 green. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Adana's Climb, 1 a green and a blue. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then if that creature has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, transform Adana's Climb. Which transforms into Winged Temple of Araska. Tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Pay 1 a green and a blue, and tap. Target creature you control gains flying and gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is its power. So, a game-winning ability on a large Hydra or something. Bred for the Hunt, 1 a green and a blue. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. More of our game plan. Hardened Scales, 1 green. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, that many +1 are placed on it instead. Next we have Planeswalkers, which, as I mentioned, work nicely with Pir, because he will double their counters when the Planeswalker comes into play. So Kiora, Master of the Depths, 2 a green and a blue for 4 loyalty. +1, untap up to 1 target creature and up to 1 target land. -2, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a creature card and or land card from among them into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard. And -8, which we can activate immediately if she gets doubled. You get an emblem with, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have it fight target creature. Then put 3 8/8 blue octopus creature tokens onto the battlefield. Nissa Vital Force, 3 and 2 green for 5 loyalty, +1 untap target land you control. Until your next turn, it becomes a 5/5 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land. -3, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. And -6, which also works nicely in our deck. You get an emblem with, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. Next we have Kiora, the Crashing Wave, who, her ultimate actually does not go off immediately if we double her. She's 4 mana for 2 loyalty, +1, until your next turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to and dealt by target permanent and opponent controls. -1, draw a card. You may play an additional land this turn. -5, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of your end step, put a 9/9 blue Kraken creature token onto the battlefield. Then we have Nissa, Steward of Elements, which works very nicely if she gets doubled. She costs X, green, blue, for X loyalty. +2, scry 2. 0, look at the top card of your library if it's a land or a creature with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa. You may put that card onto the battlefield. And -6, untap up to 2 target lands you control. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn. They are still lands. And lastly, we have Jace, Unraveler of Secrets. 3 and 2 blue for 5 loyalty, +1, scry 1, then draw a card. -2, return target creature to its owner's hand. -8, you get an emblem with, whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, counter that spell. Which is pretty good to ultimate that immediately. Next we have some artifacts. Strionic Resonator, 2 mana. Pay 2 and tap, copy target triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. And of course, Toothy has whenever you draw a card, and when Toothy leaves the battlefield, so those will be doubled. And Pir is if 1 or more counters will be put on a permanent, so I believe that is triggered as well, but I'll have to double check on that. But I suppose if we're differentiating between activated and triggered abilities, that would be a triggered, so works nicely with our commanders as well as plenty of other cards. Mind Stone, 2 mana, tap to add 1 to your mana pool, pay 1 and tap, sacrifice Mind Stone, draw a card. Astral Cornucopia, 3x. Astral Cornucopia enters the battlefield with X charge counters on it. Tap, choose a color, add 1 mana of that color for each charge counter on it. So it's fine if we play it for 1, because we will probably double it later or double it with Pir. And from there it's a very nice mana rock. Then we have Soul Ring, of course, 1 mana, tap to add 2 colorless. Horn of Greed, whenever a player plays a land, that player draws a card. We do play a lot of lands, so this will help us a little bit more than our opponent, most likely. Simic Signet, 2 mana, pay 1 and tap to add blue-green to your mana pool. Swiftfoot Boots, 2 mana, equipped creature has hexproof and haste, equip 1. And finally, Commander's Sphere. Tap, add to your mana pool 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Sacrifice Commander's Sphere, draw a card. So that's the main deck. Now we have lands. For islands, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And for forests, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'll probably have to reassess the mana base after I make some more changes. So we have Gyre Reach Sanitarium, which tap to add colorless, or pay 2 and tap. Each player draws a card, then discards a card. Temple of Mystery, enters tapped, and you scry. Myriad Landscape enters tapped, taps for 1 colorless. You can pay 2, tap, and sacrifice it. Search for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Simic Guildgate enters tapped. Terramorphic Expanse, tap and sack to search your library for a basic. Memorial to Genius enters tapped, taps for blue, pay 4 and a blue, tap and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. So, works nicely. Woodland Stream, another tap dual land. Opal Palace, tap to add colorless or pay 1 and tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. If you spend it to cast your commander, it enters with a number of additional +1/+1 counters on it, equal to the number of times it's been cast from the command zone this game. Command Tower, tap, add to your mana pool 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Temple of the False God, tap to add 2 colorless mana, activate this only if you control 5 or more lands. Memorial to Unity enters tapped and taps for green. Pay 2 and a green and tap and sacrifice it. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom. Simic Growth Chamber enters tapped, bounds a land back to your hand, and then taps for green-blue. Evolving Wilds also fetches a land. And then Thornwood Falls enters tapped. You gain a life, taps for green and blue. And that, my friends, is my Pir and Toothy deck. I've played it just once now, I believe, and it was a lot of fun. I did not win the game. It was against a Zakama deck. But I was doing pretty well, and I drew a lot of cards. When I died, I had a hand of 19 cards, I believe. Because I just kept drawing cards to try to find a way out. And that's when I realized that I didn't really put any removal into the deck. I just put in cards that synergized with counters and card draw. So now there's a bit of removal. Probably could use some more, but I am working on that. So thank you all so much for joining me today and watching this Pir and Toothy Commander deck. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day or night, and that this was relaxing to you. I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the links in the description for social media links and all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. Bye.